He was only 5 when he vanished. One moment he was playing in the snow in his front yard, by the next he was gone without a trace. For 8 years his parents searched, begged, and prayed. And then one freezing night his father crossed the street to return a neighbor's forgotten coat and saw something under the dog kennel that made him freeze. There was a trap door, and what it led to was a secret no one in town was ready for. He vanished in the snow, and for 8 unbearable years, no one knew where he was. Until one cold evening, his father glanced beneath a neighbor's dog kennel, and what he found changed everything. In the small town of Maple Hollow, Minnesota, winters were long, brutal, and beautiful. Everyone knew everyone, and safety wasn't a concern until the day little Joshua Coulter disappeared. He was just 5, a freckled redhead with a laugh that could fill a room. He had begged to play outside after a fresh snowfall. His parents, Ethan and Claire, let him, as they always had. 20 minutes later, he was gone. No footprints leading away. No sounds. No clues. The town mobilized immediately. Search parties, dive teams, detectives, nothing. Days became weeks, then months, and finally years. Joshua's face faded from flyers, but not from his parents' hearts. Ethan especially clung to every false lead, rereading witness reports and combing through hopeless evidence. 8 years later, on another snow-laden morning, Ethan sat hunched over the familiar papers when his neighbor, Harold Stevens, knocked. Harold, a man burdened by his own loss, his wife and son had been killed a decade earlier, mentioned a fallen fence on their shared property line. He had already fixed it, he said, having been working in the backyard anyway. An innocent favor, a casual exchange. But something about the visit lingered with Ethan. That afternoon, encouraged by Claire to rejoin the world, Ethan crossed the street to invite Harold for dinner. He found him crouched inside an old dog kennel at the edge of his snowy yard. Odd behavior, but grief does strange things to people. Harold claimed he was building a new kennel, planning to adopt a dog. When Ethan offered to help, Harold hesitated, but agreed. Yet within hours, Harold canceled their trip to the dog breeder, claiming he had plans with friends. But Ethan spotted him minutes later at the breeder alone. Later that day, Harold returned with a large metal kennel and what looked like a German shepherd. When Ethan offered to help, Harold refused with a sharpness that unsettled him. That night, Harold joined them for dinner, carrying a bottle of wine and a forced smile. Ethan couldn't resist probing. He asked about the dog, about the breeder, about Harold's strange behavior earlier. Harold dodged. He shifted. He lied. Claimed he'd already picked out the dog days ago. Said he'd changed his mind last minute. But Ethan remembered Harold hadn't even decided on a breed that morning. Tension thickened. Then Harold abruptly excused himself, saying the dog was outside and might be scared. He left his coat behind and didn't return. Time passed. Dinner grew cold, and then Claire noticed the coat by the door. Ethan crossed the street into the night to return it. Snowflakes swirled as he approached Harold's dark house. No answer, but a bark drew him to the backyard. There was the German shepherd still outside, pacing restlessly in and out of the old kennel. Harold was nowhere in sight. Ethan's eyes narrowed. The doghouse was crudely built, but oddly fortified. He stepped closer and noticed something strange, a padlock left hanging loose and a metal handle embedded in the floor. Heart racing, he secured the dog at a distance and opened the panel. Beneath it, a trap door, a ladder, a bunker. He called Claire. She urged him to wait for police. He agreed. But then he heard something. Footsteps, metallic, climbing. The hatch creaked open and Harold emerged, startled to see Ethan. His eyes flickered from shock to rage. Ethan offered the coat, trying to stay calm, but asked, "What's down there?" Harold grew defensive, evasive, then violent. He lunged, fists flying. They fought. Harold drew a gun. "Get in there," he growled. Ethan resisted. They grappled in the snow until Ethan disarmed him and kicked the weapon into the bunker. Just then, police sirens howled in the distance. Flashing lights cut through the snowfall. Officers separated them, restrained Harold, and turned to Ethan. And then someone began climbing from the bunker. It was a boy, 13. Thin, pale, red hair matted to his forehead. In his trembling hands, Harold's gun. The officers tensed. Ethan's breath caught. "Dad," the boy called out, eyes wild. "I won't let them take you." But Harold didn't respond. Ethan stepped forward, voice trembling. "Joshua." The boy's eyes locked onto him, confused. Ethan spoke again. "You're my son." Claire stepped forward too, tears streaking her face, holding out her phone. On the screen, a photo of a laughing 5-year-old. "You've been gone 8 years," she whispered. "We never stopped looking." Joshua froze. The gun dropped. The officers moved in. The boy's entire reality began to shatter and reshape. He looked to Harold, the man who had raised him in isolation in darkness under lies of war and death. Harold refused to meet his eyes. The illusion collapsed. Paramedics wrapped Joshua in blankets. He was confused, frightened, silent, but he didn't resist. Later at the hospital, doctors confirmed that Joshua had been malnourished, pale, underdeveloped, but alive, not abused, just kept, trained, lied to. Harold had lost his family and then taken another. Ethan and Claire stayed near their son, careful not to overwhelm him. "You don't have to remember us," Claire said. "We'll help you rediscover everything, one day at a time." Joshua stared at her. "Harold said my mom was dead, that everyone was the enemy. Why would he lie?" "Because he was broken," Ethan said. "And he did something unforgivable." In time, the boy began to remember. A scent, a song, a memory, a feeling of safety he hadn't felt in years. Harold was charged with kidnapping, assault, unlawful imprisonment. Inside the bunker, officers found journals, paranoid, delusional writings about war, safety, rebirth. They found guns, rations, plans, blueprints. Harold had created his own warped world beneath the earth and kept a stolen child in it. But now above ground, healing had begun. In the days that followed, Ethan and Claire never left Joshua's side. They brought photos, toys from his childhood favorite meals. They spoke softly, patiently. They never rushed him. They just loved him. And slowly Joshua responded. He wasn't the same little boy they lost in the snow, but he was home. And that was more than enough. For days, Joshua remained quiet. He asked few questions, spoke even less. Doctors confirmed he was physically stable but emotionally fragile. Years of isolation, mental conditioning, and misinformation had left their mark. At night, he sometimes whispered about drills, about patrols, about enemies outside. Words that weren't his own but Harold's seeded deep into his young mind. Claire stayed by his bedside every night. She never pushed. She just sat sometimes reading aloud from his old storybooks, other times just humming lullabies he once loved. Ethan handled everything else, legal meetings, media inquiries, arranging therapists. He never left the hospital without promising Joshua he'd be back first thing in the morning, and he always was. One afternoon, as Ethan entered the room with a small box of childhood keepsakes, he found Joshua tracing a finger along the edge of a photograph. It was the same picture Claire had shown him, the one with the 5-year-old boy in a red sweater grinning with snow on his nose. "That's me," Joshua asked softly. Ethan nodded, emotion welling up in his throat. "It is. You used to call that your snow hero suit. You wore it all winter." Joshua looked up. "I don't remember it, but it feels like I want to remember it." "That's okay," Ethan whispered. "We've got time." Joshua began to open up little by little. He started asking questions about their home, about what school would be like, about his old toys and favorite foods. He asked about Christmas, had they celebrated it without him. Claire had cried when she said yes, but only because they hoped each year would be the one they got him back. The hardest questions came later. "Why did Harold lie to me?" he asked one night, curled under a blanket with Claire sitting beside him. Claire looked down, her voice thick. "Because he lost people he loved, and when someone doesn't get help for their pain, it can twist them. He should have gotten help. Instead, he tried to replace what he lost. And he took you from us." Joshua nodded slowly, taking in the answer. "I didn't know I was lost," he whispered. "I know, sweetheart," Claire replied, wrapping an arm around his thin shoulders. "But now you're found." Therapy sessions began. At first they were difficult. Joshua had been trained to distrust outsiders, but his therapist was patient, kind, and gently consistent. She helped him unravel the truths from the lies, helped him separate Harold's voice from his own thoughts. Back in Maple Hollow, the town buzzed with shock and awe. News vans crowded the quiet streets for weeks. Reporters begged for interviews. Ethan and Claire declined them all. Their focus was singular Joshua. Harold remained in custody. A psychological evaluation revealed a severe delusional disorder. He believed he was preparing for a second war, one that only he could survive. His journals painted a man descending into madness, convincing himself that his bunker was a sanctuary, and Joshua, a soldier in training. But to Ethan and Claire, those details didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the boy sitting at their dinner table once again. What mattered was watching him laugh tentatively at first when Ethan slipped on snow outside the hospital. What mattered was hearing him whisper "Good night, Mom" for the first time in almost a decade. The day Joshua was released from the hospital, the sky was blue and the snow had melted just enough to show patches of green. Ethan drove slowly, pointing out places along the way: the school he would attend, the grocery store, where they got his favorite cereal, the park with the swings he once loved. When they pulled into the driveway, Joshua stared at the house. He tilted his head as if listening to something only he could hear. "It's smaller than I imagined," he said. Claire smiled. "It's just the right size for us." Inside Joshua's room was exactly as they had left it, preserved in time. The superhero bedsheets, the shelves of picture books, the posters of planets and rockets. He stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside. "I think I used to have dreams about this place," he said softly. That night Claire made spaghetti, his old favorite. He barely remembered eating it before, but the taste brought a strange comfort. They lit a fire in the fireplace, curled up with blankets, and watched a movie he picked himself. For the first time in 8 years, the house was filled with warmth, not just from the fire, but from hope. Recovery wasn't linear. Some days Joshua woke up confused. Some nights he screamed in his sleep. There were tears, setbacks, silence. But there was also progress. Slow, beautiful progress. The day he called Ethan Dad again, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It happened quietly while they were fixing a broken shelf together in the garage. "Can you hand me that screwdriver, Dad?" Ethan nearly dropped the shelf, but he didn't say anything. He just smiled and handed it over. Joshua grinned back, and for Ethan that single word undid 8 years of silence. They were a family again. Not the same as before, not untouched by pain, but resilient, rebuilding. And for the first time since the snow took their son, they believed in miracles again. If this story moved you, please consider supporting our channel. Like this video to show your love. Comment below with your thoughts or prayers for families still searching. And subscribe to Tim Stories for more true emotional stories that deserve to be heard. And if you know someone who needs to believe in miracles again, share this story with them. Because sometimes, even after 8 long years, love still finds its way home.